The space station called Horizon's Edge floated in the darkness between three star systems. It was the largest structure ever built by any species in the known galaxy. Tonight, it was filled with light, music, and the sound of 100 different languages. The Galactic Unity Ball had begun. Stood near the entrance of the Grand Hall, trying not to look as nervous as he felt. He was 28 years old, a junior translator for the Terran Alliance, and this was the biggest event he had ever attended. His dress uniform was stiff and uncomfortable. His shoes pinched his feet, but he kept his back straight and his eyes open, watching everything. The Grand Hall was beautiful beyond words. The ceiling was made of transparent crystal, showing the stars above. The floor was polished black stone that reflected the lights like a mirror. Floating platforms carried food and drinks from a dozen different worlds. Musicians from 6 species played together on a stage that hung in the air. But was not watching the decorations. He was watching the people. Delegates from 12 alien species had come to this ball. The Terran Alliance had organized the event to celebrate peace and cooperation between worlds. The tradition was simple. At some point in the evening, everyone would find a partner and dance together. It was supposed to show that different species could work together, could trust each other, could even be friends. Watched the delegates mingle and talk. He saw the eye, their hard shells glittering with jewels. He saw the aquatic in their water-filled suits, their fins moving gracefully as they walked. He saw the massive warriors, 8 feet tall and covered in thick gray skin, bowing politely to the delegate with their silver hair and pointed ears. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was talking. Everyone was finding partners. Almost everyone noticed her because she was not moving. In a room full of motion and color and noise, she stood perfectly still in the shadows near the far wall. She was tall, at least 7 feet, with skin as pale as moonlight. Her hair was black and fell past her shoulders like a waterfall of ink. Her eyes glowed with a faint red light. She wore a gown made of something that looked like liquid darkness. On her head sat a crown of black crystal that seemed to absorb the light around it. She was beautiful in a way that made his heart beat faster and slower at the same time. She was also completely alone. Knew who she was. Everyone knew. She was queen of the empire. Her species was old, older than most civilizations in the galaxy. Humans called them space vampires, though that was not entirely accurate. They did not drink blood. They fed on bioelectrical energy, the life force that all living things produced. They could drain a person dry with a single touch, leaving nothing but a cold corpse. At least, that was what the stories said. They had fought terrible wars thousands of years ago. They had conquered worlds and fed on entire populations. The other species had eventually defeated them and pushed them back to their home system. Since then, they had been isolated, feared, and hated. They were the monsters that parents warned their children about. They were the darkness that everyone avoided. But the empire was dying. Their population had fallen. Their resources were running out. Queen had come to this ball because her people needed allies, needed trade, needed a place in the galactic community. She had come in peace, dressed in her finest clothes, hoping that someone would give her a chance. No one did. Watched as delegate after delegate walked past the vampire queen without even looking at her. He watched as she stood there, hour after hour, her face showing no emotion. He watched as the grand hall filled with laughter and partnership and unity, while she remained in her corner like a ghost. It made him angry. His superior officer, commander, appeared at his side. She was a stern woman in her 40s with gray hair cut short and eyes that missed nothing. "Stop staring at the queen," she said quietly. "It draws attention. Someone should talk to her," said. "No one will. No one wants to be associated with her species." "That is not fair," Commander sighed. "Fair has nothing to do with politics, Lieutenant. They are feared for good reason. Their history is written in blood and death. The other delegations would be angry if Earth showed them favor." "She came alone," said. "She brought no guards, no weapons. She came to a party about unity and no one will even look at her. That is her problem, not ours." But could not stop watching. He thought about Earth's own history. Humans had not always been respected in the galaxy. When they first made contact with alien species, they were considered primitive, aggressive, and dangerous. Other civilizations had wanted to quarantine Earth to keep humans contained before they could spread their violence to the stars. An ambassador had changed that. She had argued that humans deserved a chance. She had extended her hand in friendship when everyone else wanted to push humanity away. She had said that isolation only bred the very monsters that people feared. Had learned about her in school. Every human child learned about Ambassador, the who had saved humanity from eternal isolation. They were taught to remember her kindness and to pay it forward whenever they could. He looked at Queen standing alone in the shadows. He looked at the galaxy celebrating unity around her. He looked at his own hand, small and weak and human. The music changed. A slow, formal song began to play. This was the moment when partners were supposed to come together for the traditional dance. All around the hall, delegates turned to face each other. Hands were extended. Bows were exchanged. Pairs began to form. No one approached the vampire queen. Made a decision. He started walking toward her. His heart was pounding in his chest. His palms were sweating. He could feel Commander's eyes burning into his back, but he did not stop. The crowd seemed to part before him, though he was not sure if that was real or just his imagination. The music swelled, the lights dimmed, and step by step he crossed the grand hall of the greatest space station ever built, heading toward the most feared creature in the galaxy. Queen saw him coming. Her red eyes tracked his approach with an expression he could not read. She did not move, did not speak, did not react in any way. She simply watched him, like a predator watching something too small to be food but too strange to ignore. Stopped 3 feet in front of her. Up close, she was even more beautiful and even more terrifying. The cold radiated off her skin like winter. The shadows around her seemed to move on their own. Her crown caught the starlight and turned it into something darker. He took a deep breath. "Your Majesty," he said, and his voice only shook a little. "My name is Junior Translator for the Terran Alliance." The vampire queen looked down at him. Her face was still, like a statue carved from ice. "I know what you are," she said. Her voice was soft and cold and beautiful, like silk wrapped around a blade. "You are human, young, unimportant. Why do you approach me?" Swallowed hard, his mouth was dry. Every instinct told him to run, to bow, to apologize and retreat. But he thought of Ambassador, he thought of kindness, he thought of what it meant to be truly alone. He raised his hand toward her. "May I have this dance?" The entire hall went silent. The silence in the grand hall was complete. Every conversation stopped. Every glass was lowered. Every eye turned toward the small human standing before the vampire queen with his hand extended. Could feel the weight of 1,000 stares pressing down on him. His arm was starting to shake, but he kept it raised. He kept his eyes on Queen's face, searching for any sign of what she might be thinking. She looked at his hand like it was something she had never seen before. Her crimson eyes moved slowly from his fingers to his face, studying him with an intensity that made him feel like she was reading his soul. "You are asking me to dance," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, Your Majesty. You know what I am, what my people have done. I know that you are standing alone at a party about unity. That seems wrong to me." A murmur ran through the crowd, heard someone laugh nervously. He heard someone else whisper something harsh in a language he did not recognize, but he did not look away from the queen. Commander appeared at his side, her face tight with controlled anger. She grabbed his free arm and tried to pull him back. "Lieutenant, this is not appropriate," she said through clenched teeth. "You are causing an incident. Earth cannot afford to offend the other delegations by associating with them." "Then Earth should not have invited her," said. He did not lower his hand. "This is not your decision to make. Someone has to make it." Queen watched this exchange with an expression that might have been amusement or might have been contempt. It was hard to tell. Her face was like a mask, beautiful and cold and unreadable. "Your subordinate is brave," she said to Commander, "or perhaps foolish. The line between the two is often thin." "Your Majesty, I apologize for any offense," Commander began, but raised one pale hand and she went silent. "I was not offended," the Queen said. "I was surprised. It has been a very long time since anyone surprised me." She turned her full attention back, too. Her eyes seemed to glow brighter, and he felt a strange warmth spreading through his chest. He realized with a start that she was sensing his bioelectrical field, tasting his life force without actually draining it. "You are afraid of me," she said. "Yes." "But you approached me anyway." "Yes." "Why?" Thought about the question carefully before answering. All around them, the galaxy held its breath. "When humanity first reached the stars, everyone was afraid of us," he said. "We were considered violent, primitive, dangerous. The other species wanted to isolate us, to keep us locked on our own world forever. They said we were monsters who would destroy everything we touched." Tilted her head slightly. "I remember, it was only 200 years ago, a short time for my people. An ambassador saved us. She argued that we deserved a chance to prove ourselves. She extended her hand in friendship when everyone else wanted to push us away. She said that isolation breeds the very monsters that people fear. And you think I am like humanity was then? That I deserve the same chance? I think no one should have to stand alone when they came in good faith." The queen was quiet for a long moment. The shadows around her seemed to deepen, and the temperature dropped even further. His breath came out in small white clouds, but he did not move. "My people have killed millions," said softly. "We have drained worlds of life. We have been the darkness that other species fled from. These are not lies or exaggerations. This is our history." "Humans have killed millions too," replied. "We had wars that burned our own planet. We built weapons that could destroy cities in seconds. We are not innocent either. And yet, you stand before me with an open hand. Because I believe people can change. I believe species can change. And I believe that kindness is worth the risk." Something shifted in the queen's expression. It was small, barely noticeable, but saw it. For just a moment, the mask cracked, and he glimpsed something beneath it, something old and tired and desperately lonely. "You are very strange, human," she said. "I have been told that before." For the first time, the corner of her mouth twitched. It was almost a smile. She reached out and took his hand. Her skin was cold, but not as cold as he had expected. Her grip was gentle, carefully controlled to avoid hurting him, and her hand fit into his in a way that felt strangely natural. A gasp ran through the crowd. Someone dropped a glass, and it shattered on the stone floor, but barely hurt it. He was too focused on the vampire queen standing before him. "I accept your offer of the Terran Alliance," she said. "Let us show the galaxy how to dance." They moved to the center of the hall. The crowd parted around them like water flowing around a stone. The music, which had stopped during their exchange, started again. It was a slow waltz, an earth song that the orchestra had learned for the occasion. Placed one hand on the queen's waist and kept the other in her grip. She was much taller than him, and he had to look up to meet her eyes. But somehow they made it work. They began to dance, moved with a grace that came from 3,000 years of practice. Her feet seemed to float above the floor, and her body flowed like water. Was not as skilled, but he had learned formal dancing as part of his diplomatic training. He followed her lead, matching her steps, letting the music carry them both. "You are warm," she said as they turned. "Humans run hot compared to most species. Our planet was cold once, and we evolved to keep our body temperature high. It is pleasant, like standing near a fire. Is that why people fear your kind? Because you can sense their warmth and want to take it?" The question was rude, but did not seem offended. She considered it as they moved through another turn. "Perhaps the feed on bioelectrical energy. We do not need to kill to eat. A small amount of energy can sustain us for weeks. But in the old days, my ancestors were not careful. They took too much because they could. They enjoyed the power. And now we are dying. Our empire has shrunk to a single system. Our population falls every year. We have been alone so long that we have forgotten how to be anything else." "That is why you came here." "Yes, I came hoping someone would see past our history. I came hoping for a chance." She looked down at him with those glowing red eyes. "I did not expect to find it from a junior translator." Smiled. "Sometimes the important things come from unexpected places." They danced in silence for a while. The crowd was still watching, but the atmosphere had changed. The shock was fading, replaced by curiosity. Some delegates were whispering to each other, pointing at the human and the vampire queen moving together across the floor. At a table near the edge of the hall, Ambassador Park sat watching with sharp eyes. She was Earth's senior diplomat at this event, a woman of 60 years with a mind like a blade. She saw what was happening, and she began to calculate. At another table, High Prelate of the Eye Confederacy watched with a very different expression. His compound eyes glittered with hatred as he stared at the Queen. The Eye and the had been enemies for. His people had suffered greatly during the ancient wars. He would not forget, he would not forgive, but knew nothing of politics or ancient hatreds. He only knew that he was dancing with a queen who had been abandoned by the galaxy, and for this one moment she was not alone. "Thank you," said quietly as the song neared its end. "For what?" "For seeing me, for extending your hand, for taking a risk when no one else would. It was the right thing to do." "Perhaps, but the right thing is often the hardest thing. Most people choose the easy path." The music stopped. The dance was over, but neither of them moved to separate. They stood in the center of the hall, hand in hand, while the galaxy watched and wondered what would happen next. Ambassador Park stood up from her table. She smoothed her dress, put on her diplomatic smile, and began walking toward them. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Everything had changed. Ambassador Park reached them just as the music faded into silence. She moved with the confidence of someone who had spent 40 years navigating the dangerous waters of galactic politics. Her smile was warm, but her eyes were calculating every possibility. "Queen," she said, bowing slightly, "I am Ambassador Park, senior diplomatic representative of the Terran Alliance. I hope you are enjoying the evening." Inclined her head in acknowledgement. She had not released hand yet. "Ambassador Park, your junior translator has made this evening far more interesting than I expected. Lieutenant has always had a talent for finding unexpected solutions." Ambassador Park glanced at with an expression that promised a long conversation later. "Your Majesty, I wonder if you might join me for a private discussion. I believe there are matters of mutual interest we could explore." The vampire queen studied her for a moment. "You saw an opportunity when your subordinate acted. You wished to use his gesture for political gain. I saw a chance for both our peoples to benefit. Is that not what diplomacy is?" A thin smile crossed lips. "At least you are honest about your motivations. Very well, Ambassador, I will speak with you." She finally released his hand. The warmth faded immediately, and he realized how cold the hall had become around them. The other delegates were still watching, still whispering, still trying to understand what had just happened. "Lieutenant," said, looking down at him one last time, "I will not forget what you did tonight." Then she turned and walked away with Ambassador Park, leaving alone in the center of the hall. Commander appeared beside him instantly. Her face was a storm of emotions, anger, confusion, and something that might have been grudging respect. "That was either the bravest or the thing I have ever seen," she said. "Probably both. You may have just changed the entire direction of galactic politics. Or started a war." "Or started a war," she sighed heavily. "Come on, we need to talk." The next 3 days were a blur of meetings, negotiations, and carefully worded statements. Ambassador Park worked tirelessly to build on the foundation that had accidentally created. She met with Queen for hours at a time, discussing trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and the possibility of a formal alliance between Earth and the Empire. The other delegations watched nervously. Some were curious, wondering if they had misjudged the. Others were angry, feeling that Earth was betraying the galactic community by associating with their ancient enemy. The I delegation was particularly furious. High Prelate made several public statements warning that any alliance with them would have consequences. Was kept busy with translation work. He sat in on meetings, converting complex diplomatic language between a dozen different tongues. He watched Queen negotiate with skill that came from 3,000 years of experience. He watched Ambassador Park match her move for move, two masters playing a game that would shape the future of billions. But in the quiet moments between meetings, he and talked. They would find themselves in the same corridor, or the same observation deck, or the same dining hall. At first, it seemed like coincidence. Later, wondered if it was something else. "Tell me about Earth," she said one evening. They were standing before a massive window, watching the stars turn slowly around them. "What do you want to know?" "Everything, your history, your culture. how you survived when everyone wanted you destroyed." So he told her. He talked about the early days of human space travel when their ships were slow and fragile. He talked about the first contact, when an alien probe found Earth and the galaxy learned that humans existed. He talked about the fear and the anger and the proposals to quarantine humanity forever. "We were considered too dangerous to be allowed among the stars," he said. "Too violent, too unpredictable. And yet, here you are. Because one person believed in us, ambassador of the..." She argued that isolation would only make us worse. She convinced the Galactic Council to give us a chance. He smiled sadly. "She died before she could see what we became, but we remember her. Every human child learns her name." Was silent for a long moment. The starlight played across her pale features, making her look almost ghostly. "My people were not given such kindness," she said finally. "When the ancient wars ended, we were pushed back to our home system and forgotten. No one argued for us. No one believed we could change." "Did you want to change?" "I did not know. I was young then, only a few hundred years old. I believed what I was taught, that we were superior, that other species existed to feed us, that our isolation was a temporary setback before our eventual return to power. And now? Now I am old. I have watched my people dwindle generation by generation. I have seen the loneliness eat away at our culture, our hope, our will to live. I have learned that being superior means nothing if you are alone." She turned to look at him, her red eyes softer than he had ever seen them. "You asked me to dance when no one else would. You saw me as a person, not a monster. Do you know how long it has been since anyone looked at me that way? I only did what I thought was right. That is what makes it meaningful. You had no obligation to me. You had nothing to gain and everything to lose, yet you extended your hand anyway." She reached out and touched his cheek. Her fingers were cool against his skin, but not unpleasantly so. He felt a gentle tingle as her awareness brushed against his bioelectrical field. "Your people have a saying," she murmured, "that one act of kindness can change the world. We have many sayings like that. We are optimists despite our history. Perhaps that is what makes humans special. You have seen the worst of yourselves, yet you still believe in the best." Their moment was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Ambassador Park appeared around the corner, her clutched in her hands and her face tight with concern. "Lieutenant, Queen, there is a situation." "What has happened?" His voice shifted instantly, becoming cold and commanding. The Queen had returned. "High Prelate has called an emergency session of the delegations. He is demanding that Earth break off all negotiations with the Orpheus sanctions from the Eye Confederacy." Felt his stomach drop. Can he do that? The Eye controls several important trade routes. Their sanctions could hurt our colonies significantly. Ambassador Park looked at. "Your Majesty, I apologize. It seems that my hope for a smooth negotiation was premature." But did not look worried. If anything, she looked almost amused. "Was always a fool," she said. "He lets his hatred blind him to opportunity. Let him make his demands. Let him show the galaxy that the Eye would rather preserve old grudges than build new alliances." "You are not concerned." "I have been hated for 3,000 years, Ambassador. One more enemy changes nothing," she glanced at. "What matters is whether you will stand with me when the pressure comes." Ambassador Park hesitated, could see her weighing the costs and benefits, calculating the political implications. It was a difficult choice: risk the anger of the Eye or abandon the alliance that had just begun. "Earth does not abandon its friends," she said finally. "We will attend the emergency session together." Nodded slowly. Something flickered in her eyes, gratitude perhaps, or hope. "Then let us show them what an alliance truly means." They walked toward the meeting chamber together, human and side by side. Behind them, hidden in the shadows of the corridor, a figure watched them go. It was an Eye servant, one of many who worked throughout the station. But this servant had a small device in his pocket, and his compound eyes glittered with purpose. The assassination had been planned from the moment Queen arrived. High Prelate was many things, but he was not a fool. He knew that words alone might not be enough to stop the human alliance. He was prepared to use other methods. The emergency session would provide the perfect opportunity. In a room full of delegates, with the galaxy watching, the vampire queen would die, and Earth would learn the cost of extending a hand to monsters. The servant smiled and followed at a safe distance. Soon, everything would change. The emergency session was held in the main conference chamber of Horizon's Edge. It was a circular room with seats arranged in rising tiers, like an ancient amphitheater. At the center was a round platform where speakers could address the gathered delegates. Above everything, a massive dome showed the stars wheeling slowly in the eternal darkness. Representatives from all 12 species had gathered. The room buzzed with conversation in a dozen languages. Tensions were high, and everyone could feel it. Something important was about to happen. Sat in the Earth section with Commander and several other human delegates. Ambassador Park stood on the central platform beside Queen, presenting their case for the human alliance. High Prelate sat across the chamber with the Eye delegation, his compound eyes fixed on the vampire queen with undisguised hatred. The Empire has been isolated for centuries, Ambassador Park was saying. This isolation has served no one. It has not made the galaxy safer. It has only prolonged old wounds and prevented healing. The wounds are not old, interrupted. His voice was harsh and clicking, translated by the automated systems. My species remembers the wars. We remember our worlds drained of life. We remember the darkness that came when the vampires fed. Those wars ended 3,000 years ago, said calmly. None who fought in them still live, except for me. I remember the wars as well, High Prelate. I remember the mistakes my people made. That is why I seek a different path. A path paved with the blood of innocence. A path paved with hope. The vampire queen's voice remained steady. I have come here in peace. I have brought no weapons, no guards, no threats. I ask only for a chance to prove that my people can change. The debate continued for an hour. Arguments flew back and forth. Some delegates supported the alliance, seeing the economic benefits of opening trade with the... Others sided with the Eye, warning that the vampires could not be trusted. The room was evenly divided. Watched it all with growing frustration. He had started this by asking the Queen to dance. Now it had become a political battle that he could not control. All he could do was sit and hope that reason would win. He did not notice the Eye servant moving through the chamber. He did not see the figure slip closer to the central platform, a tray of drinks held carefully in front of him. He did not see the small weapon hidden beneath the servant's sleeve. But he saw the moment everything changed. The servant was 3 meters from Queen when he dropped the tray. The crash of breaking glass drew everyone's attention. In that moment of distraction, the assassin raised his arm and fired. The weapon was a neural disruptor, specifically designed to attack physiology. It fired a beam of energy that would overload a vampire's bioelectrical system, causing immediate organ failure. It was illegal in most systems, but the Eye had preserved several from the ancient wars. Saw it coming, her ancient reflexes began to react, her body starting to move out of the way, but she was too slow. The weapon had been designed specifically to kill her kind. There was no escape. Did not think, he did not calculate, he simply moved. He threw himself off the viewing platform and sprinted toward the Queen. People shouted. Chairs scraped, but he was focused only on one thing, getting between and the weapon. He made it by half a second. The neural disruptor hit him square in the chest. The pain was indescribable. Every nerve in his body seemed to catch fire at once. His heart stuttered, stopped, then started again in a rhythm that felt wrong. His vision went white, then black, then shattered into 1,000 fragments of light. He fell, caught him before he hit the ground. Her ancient strength made his weight feel like nothing. She held him in her arms, staring down at his convulsing body with an expression of pure shock. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this?" Could not answer. His body was failing. The neural disruptor had not been designed for humans, but it was still devastating. His nervous system was shutting down. His heart was beating wildly out of control. He could feel himself slipping away. Around them, chaos erupted. Security forces rushed into the chamber. The assassin was tackled to the ground. High Prelate was shouting denials, claiming he knew nothing about the attack. Delegates were screaming, running, trying to get away from the violence. But Queen did not move. She looked down at the human in her arms, the small, warm creature who had asked her to dance when no one else would. She felt his bioelectrical field flickering like a candle in a storm. She watched his life slipping away because he had chosen to save her. And she made a decision that could drain energy from other beings. It was what they were known for, what they were feared for. But the reverse was also possible. A could give energy instead of taking it. The process was dangerous and costly. It would drain the giver significantly, possibly permanently. No had done it in recorded history. Did not hesitate. She placed her hand over his heart and opened herself. Her bioelectrical essence, accumulated over 3,000 years, began to flow out of her and into him. Golden light spilled from her fingers, sinking into his chest, spreading through his body. His heart steadied, his breathing deepened, his seizures stopped. The room went silent. Queen of the Empire, the most powerful vampire in the galaxy, knelt on the floor of the conference chamber and gave her life force to save a human. Her pale skin grew even paler, her crimson eyes dimmed. Her strength, her power, her ancient vitality, all of it flowed into the small man she held in her arms. "Your Majesty," Ambassador Park said, her voice shaking. "What are you doing?" "Passing it on," said softly. "He extended his hand to me. Now I give him mine." She kept giving until she could give no more. Then she collapsed beside him, exhausted beyond measure, her crown falling from her head and rolling across the floor. When the medical teams arrived, they found two bodies lying on the platform. One was human, unconscious but stable. One was barely alive, drained of everything that made her powerful. Both of them were smiling. The next hours were a blur of activity. Was rushed to the medical bay, where human doctors worked frantically to repair the damage from the neural disruptor. The energy had given him had saved his life, but his nervous system was still badly injured. It would take time to heal. Was placed in a separate room, surrounded by monitoring equipment that the station had hastily adapted for physiology. She had given too much. Her body was struggling to survive with so little energy remaining. The doctors did not know if she would recover. The political fallout was immediate and severe. High Prelate was arrested when the assassin confessed to acting under his orders. The I Confederacy issued frantic apologies, trying to distance themselves from the attempted murder. The other delegations watched in shock, their opinions shifting dramatically. Everyone had seen what happened. Everyone had watched the vampire queen save a human's life. Everyone had seen her sacrifice her own strength for someone who had shown her simple kindness. Ambassador Park worked through the night, turning the tragedy into triumph. She gave interviews, made statements, and negotiated with the other delegations. By morning, the Human Alliance had more supporters than anyone had imagined possible. But none of that mattered too. When he finally woke up, 3 days later, the first thing he saw was Queen sitting beside his bed. She looked terrible, pale even by standards, thin and weak, her eyes barely glowing. But she was there. "You should be resting," he said. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "I needed to see that you survived." She tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "You are very foolish, throwing yourself in front of a weapon designed to kill vampires. It seemed like the right thing to do. You could have died. So could you." They looked at each other in silence. The medical equipment beeped softly around them. Through the window, the stars continued their eternal dance. "Why did you save me?" asked finally. "You gave so much, you might never fully recover." Was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentler than he had ever heard it. "Because someone extended their hand to me," she said. "Because kindness deserves kindness in return. Because for the first time in 3,000 years, I felt like I belonged somewhere." She reached out and took his hand. Her skin was warmer than before, closer to human temperature. He wondered if that was because of what she had given him. "My people have a tradition," she continued. "When someone saves your life, you owe them a debt. When you save theirs in return, the debt becomes something else, something permanent. We call it soul debt in your language." "What does that mean?" "It means we are bound to each other, not as debtor and creditor, but as partners, equals, two halves of the same whole." Thought about that. He thought about the lonely queen at the ball. He thought about the hand he had extended. He thought about the future stretching out before them both. "Is that a proposal?" he asked with a weak smile. Actually laughed. It was a small sound, soft and surprised, like she had forgotten how. Perhaps it is, she said. What do you say of Earth? Will you be bound to a vampire queen? He squeezed her hand gently. I think I already am. Outside the medical bay, the galaxy continued to turn. Treaties were being signed. Alliances were being formed. The future was being written, one moment at a time. But in that small room, two people who had started as strangers held hands and began to build something new together. The treaty between Earth and the Empire was signed 7 days after the assassination attempt. It was the first formal alliance that had made in 800 years, and it changed everything. Ambassador Park stood at the signing ceremony, watching as human and representatives put their marks on the document. The agreement covered trade, cultural exchange, mutual defense, and a dozen other provisions that would bind the two peoples together. It was the beginning of something new. Queen was there, though she still looked weak. She had recovered enough to walk and speak, but her full strength would take decades to return. The energy she had given to save had cost her dearly. Some of her advisors whispered that she would never be as powerful as she once was. She did not seem to care. Stood beside her, still healing from his own injuries. The doctors said he would make a full recovery, though he might always have some sensitivity to electrical fields. A small price to pay, he thought, for what they had gained. After the ceremony, the galaxy watched the footage of what had happened in the conference chamber. They watched a human throw himself in front of a weapon to save an alien queen. They watched that queen sacrifice her power to save him in return. They watched two strangers become something more through mutual acts of kindness and courage. The story spread across 100 worlds. Children learned about the human translator who asked the vampire queen to dance. They learned about the power of extending a hand when everyone else looked away. They learned that kindness could change history. For Earth, the Alliance opened new possibilities. They had technologies that humans had never seen, ways of traveling through darkness, methods of sensing energy fields, knowledge preserved from before most species existed. In return, humans offered something equally valuable: warmth, connection, and a willingness to see past old fears. It meant something even more important. After centuries of isolation, they were part of the galactic community again. Trade ships began visiting their system. Young traveled to human worlds to study and work. The population decline slowed, then stopped, then began to reverse. Hope returned to a people who had nearly forgotten what it felt like. The I Confederacy paid a heavy price for actions. He was tried and convicted of attempted murder and conspiracy. The other species imposed sanctions, and the Confederacy lost much of its influence in galactic politics. But even among the I, there were those who began to question the old hatreds. 50 years passed. The space station Horizon's Edge had been upgraded and expanded many times. It was now the center of galactic diplomacy, a place where representatives from dozens of species came to negotiate, celebrate, and build connections. The Grand Hall where the first Unity Ball had been held was now a museum, preserved exactly as it had been on that historic night. The 50th anniversary celebration was even larger than the original. Thousands of delegates filled the station. Music played from a dozen worlds. Floating platforms carried food and drinks that humans of 50 years ago could never have imagined. Walked through the crowd slowly. He was 78 years old now, his hair gray and his face lined with age. He used a cane to help him walk, though his back was still straight and his eyes were still sharp. He had served as the permanent liaison between Earth and the Empire for 5 decades, and he was proud of what they had built together. Queen walked beside him. She looked almost the same as she had 50 years ago. They aged slowly, if at all, but there were subtle differences. Her eyes were softer. Her smile came more easily. The cold distance that had surrounded her in the old days was gone, replaced by something warmer. They had never officially married by human standards, but the bond was recognized by both species as something deeper than marriage. They were partners in everything, two halves of a whole, just as she had said all those years ago. "Are you tired?" asked, noticing him slow down. "A little. I am not as young as I used to be." "You are still young to me. You will always be the young human who asked me to dance." He laughed. "I was terrified that night. My legs were shaking." "I know. I could feel it. That made your courage even more impressive. They found a quiet corner where they could watch the celebration without being in the middle of it. Around them, humans and mingled freely, laughing and talking and dancing together. It would have been unthinkable 50 years ago. Now it was ordinary, normal, beautiful. "We did well," said softly. "We did. Do you ever regret it? The choice you made?" Considered the question. He thought about the years of hard work, the political battles, the challenges they had faced together. He thought about the things he had given up to be with her, a normal human life, children of his own blood, growing old with someone who would age alongside him. "Never," he said, "not for a moment." She took his hand. Her skin was warm now, almost human temperature. Over the decades, she had changed in ways that went beyond biology. She had learned to feel, to trust, to love. He liked to think he had something to do with that. Across the hall, a commotion caught his attention. The crowd was parting, making way for someone. Voices whispered in surprise and curiosity. A young Eye woman stood alone near the entrance. She was dressed in formal robes, but her head was bowed and her arms were wrapped around herself. She looked terrified and lost, like someone who expected to be rejected at any moment. Understood immediately. The Eye were still struggling to rebuild their reputation after crime. Many species still distrusted them. This young woman had probably been sent as a representative, hoping to show that the new generation was different from the old. But no one was approaching her. No one was welcoming her. She was standing alone, just as had stood alone 50 years ago. The Vampire Queen saw it too. Her eyes met, and something passed between them, understanding, memory, purpose. "Go," she said gently. "I am too old for this." "You are never too old for kindness." He smiled, squeezed her hand, and began to walk toward the Eye woman. It took him a while to cross the hall. His legs were not what they used to be, but he kept moving one step at a time while the crowd watched and whispered. The young woman saw him coming. Her compound eyes widened with recognition. Everyone in the galaxy knew the human who had changed history with a single gesture. He stopped in front of her and bowed slightly. His back protested, but he ignored it. "Welcome to the Unity Ball," he said. "My name is, I am pleased to meet you." The Eye woman stared at him. She was trembling, and he realized with a start that she was crying, or at least the Eye equivalent of crying. You do not hate us," she whispered. "I do not know you well enough to hate you. I do know that you are standing alone at a party about unity. That seems like something we should fix." He extended his hand toward her. "May I have this dance?" The hall went quiet. Every eye turned toward them. The moment stretched out, infinite and precious, full of possibility. The young Eye woman looked at his hand. She looked at his face. She looked at Queen watching from across the room with a gentle smile. She took his hand. A cheer erupted from somewhere in the crowd, then another. Soon the whole hall was applauding, laughing, celebrating. Music started to play and led the young Eye woman to the dance floor. He was old and slow, and she was nervous and clumsy. But somehow they made it work. They danced together while the galaxy watched, proving once again that kindness could bridge any gap, heal any wound, transform any future. From her quiet corner, watched her partner dance with the frightened young woman. She thought about the night they had met when she had been the one standing alone. She thought about the hand he had extended, the risk he had taken, the gift he had given her simply by seeing her as a person instead of a monster. And she understood, finally, why humans were special. It was not their strength or their technology or their numbers. It was their endless, irrational, beautiful capacity for hope. They believed in second chances. They believed in redemption. They believed that a single act of kindness could change the world. Sometimes they were right. The dance ended. The applause faded, and walked slowly back to side, breathing hard but smiling. "How was that?" he asked. "Perfect," she said. "Absolutely perfect." She kissed him gently, there in front of everyone, human and alien and everything in between. The gesture was simple, but its meaning was profound. It said that love could cross any boundary. It said that connection was possible between any two beings. It said that the future was bright as long as there were people willing to extend their hands. The celebration continued long into the night. Stories were told, friendships were made, and new partnerships were formed. The galaxy spun on, vast and mysterious and full of possibilities. And somewhere in the middle of it all, an old human man and an ancient vampire queen sat together, hand in hand, watching the future unfold. They had started something 50 years ago. They had proven that kindness was stronger than fear, that hope was more powerful than hatred, that a single gesture could reshape the stars. Now others would carry it forward. The cycle would continue, generation after generation, species after species, hand extended to hand extended forever. That was their legacy. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not weapons or technology or conquest, but something simpler and more profound. The courage to reach out, the strength to be kind, the faith that extending your hand was always, always worth the risk. The end.